ICQ Podcast, episode 467. Allan Wiener, Whiskey Bravo Charlie, Quebec. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to episode 467 of your ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported in this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOI, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is an interview with Allan Wiener, Whiskey Bravo Charlie, Quebec. Well, as always, as we mentioned, it's your wonderful support of your monthly and subscription donors that keep your ICQ podcast advert free, and we would like you to consider us in the value for value model if you find value from today's show. All we ask you to do is to visit our special webpage, ICQPodcast.com/donate, where you can, turn the value you receive into a monetary figure and select one of the options, send it our way, and all the money we receive goes towards keeping your ICQ podcast advert free. So please do consider visiting ICQPodcast.com/donate. Right now we join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including defending antenna legislation and a call for hams to track NASA's moon mission. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 467 of the ICQ podcast and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. We've had a jovial hour's chat before we started, so expect some fun tonight. With us tonight, we have Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Martin, and our listeners all over the world.
Yeah. Oh, we've had some fun tonight. Also, your side of the pond, we have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hi. If Dan will stop making me laugh, I will greet our listeners and say I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah. Now, I know a number of our listeners have said on many occasions, why can't we hear the outtakes? But maybe not. Maybe not. My side of the pond, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And over there in Germany, Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
I have no idea what the people were laughing about. Good evening, everybody.
Not much you don't, but yeah. Oh, dear, good evening. So, good fun tonight. Okay, we're going to start off with legislation in the States. Amateur radio preps to defend the antenna legislation. So this one's been going on a while, I think. But Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, so what this is all about is these bills have once again been reintroduced into Congress. So while the whole topic has been going on a long time, these are particularly two new bills that have been introduced. The ARRL wants everyone, all hams, and not even just all hams, anybody who's interested in the topic, to send their congressional representatives, the House of Representatives, and their two senators, a letter supporting these bills. And they've made it much easier. They've set up some kind of web thing where you just basically type in your call sign and it'll figure out who your representatives are and send them letters, saying, hey, please support these bills. This is all really great. I mean, in a way, it's kind of a shame that the ARRL hasn't done this before because, this, like you say, this has been going on a long time. But it is good, and I've already done this myself, and I would encourage all the U.S. hams to do this as well. And I think all you need to do is go to ARRL.org/HOA, and you'll find the form to fill out.
Well, that's good news, Dan. That's good news, especially if you're making it easier for people to fire off these letters. Then, we should be swamping the people receiving them. Hi. Caryn, what's your thoughts?
Okay, I should start by explaining for perhaps those listeners who either don't know what an HOA is, a homeowners association, or don't live in one. This is an organization that exists in lots of communities. It's very, very common here in the U.S., and the HOA entity is becoming more and more common because as housing developments continue to burgeon here, more and more of these places are governed by HOAs. And when I say governed, I don't mean that they are a government entity, but when a person purchases a home or a condo in one of these communities, and typically they're planned communities, many of them can be gated communities that value aesthetics and sameness and what they call quote unquote quality of life. The purchaser enters into a contract with the property that they're buying into, and the contract will have very, very specific things about what can and cannot be done. And in exchange for that, of course, with a lot of the land being held commonly, people don't have to worry about mowing the grass and doing landscaping, things like that. So, yes, there's trade off there. And certainly these HOAs are not going away. Now, there is federal protection for things like TV antennas, satellite dishes. So it's not like this bill is asking for something that is without precedence. There is antenna protection. It's just not applicable to amateur radio antennas, meaning that hams who live in these HOAs have to go stealth. They'll either put up a flagpole that's really an antenna, or if they're fortunate enough to have an attic, they can run an antenna in the attic. But this is not the real answer. Going undercover is not the real answer. And the fact of the matter is that the strength of these bills is rooted in the fact that ham radio does provide a real public service, particularly in emergencies. So why not give them the same protection as under the current federal protection that applies to television satellite? I don't live in an HOA, and in fact, I was on I checked into a net, one of my clubs, the Larkfield Amateur Radio Club, which I love. It is here in Huntington, New York. After we had the first round in the net, the second half of the net was the question of the week, and it was, would you ever live in an HOA? And oh boy, you should have heard the answers. I don't think anybody, knowing that this is what would happen to the amateur radio hobby if they moved in, nobody wants to be told that they can't put up an antenna, they can't get on the air. So let's hope this last time is a charm. Let's certainly hope so. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, let's hope it is. And the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking was, your parents might move in with and not be interested in ham radio. But if one of their siblings suddenly decides they want to get involved, and let's face it, we're trying to get youngsters in the hobby, and suddenly they can't put up an antenna, that's almost squidging our hobby, and it's depriving people of emergency responders in some ways. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one? Do you have the same problem in Germany?
No, and I haven't really got a comment on this because this is very much a US situation with the HOAs. So, no, I mean, yeah, local councils have various restrictions and everything else, but here in Bavaria, the rule is quite simple. Anything less than 10 meters high, you don't need planning permission for an antenna. So it's a lot less of a problem over here. Other countries could be different, of course. What about in the UK, Martin?
Yeah, in the UK, it changed a few years back and said you had to apply for planning permission for certain antennas. Mine have been up a lot longer than that. In fact, I've got a HF vertical at the bottom of the garden that I bought for the square root of nothing that's never had any power up it. It's just a holding, it's a holding area. But the antenna's been there for years, mate. If I change it for something else, I can argue all I've done is replace something with a new model. So I'm being naughty. Edmund, what's your thoughts on that one?
Well, far be it from me to say anything naughty regarding HOAs, but I notice with interest that a Yagi for pretty much any band will always look an awful lot bigger when it's sitting on the floor in front of you than it ever will when it's up on a pole on top of your house. So if TV antennas are allowed, then a Yagi for 70 centimetres for television, or 1.25 or 2 metres for FM broadcast radio, could be passed off potentially as something that they're not, if you see what I mean. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, see what you mean. I think, though, that we can do all sorts of things. I mean, you could put a slot in a satellite dish and have a slot antenna for VHF, but I think it's HF that's the killer for people in HOAs. So, yeah, let's hope this bill goes through, because I'm sure that other countries will be looking at it, and if it all goes through in the States, maybe they'll have a precedent in other countries to do the same. Okay, moving to our next news story. Once again in the States, the FCC legalizes jamming of mobile phones by prisons. Caryn, you weren't 100% sure if this was a good idea or not, were you?
I'm on the fence. Because this is a double-edged sword. The reason the jamming has been approved is because legitimately cell phones are being smuggled into prisons for use by inmates to engage in probably some of the same business that got them in prison in the first place. So, idle hands are the devil's workshop, I guess. They're conducting all kinds of business, according to this argument, from drug dealing to ordering killings from behind bars. And there was there's been some testimony about that a gunman actually tried to kill a prison guard, and the hit had been ordered. According to the news story that I read, the hit had been ordered by a prisoner where this guard had been working. Didn't kill him, but pretty much messed up his life. He's had dozens of corrective surgeries and can no longer work. So legitimately, yeah, there's a need to stop the functionality of these unauthorized cell phones, which are successfully getting into the prison. But this raises concerns since jamming is illegal. How do you contain the extent of the jamming? As a colleague of mine pointed out when we were discussing this, he said to me, well, what if grandma goes to visit her grandson who's incarcerated, and upon leaving the visiting period, goes back out to her car, is about to get into the car, and she suffers a medical emergency and reaches for her cell phone to dial for assistance and can't get out because the cell service is being jammed. So you have concerns here. Again, in concept, it sounds worthy because there is a legitimate problem, although one might say, well, then just prevent the phones from being brought into the prison. Well, that is easier said than done because people are awfully clever. But I think before this is fully implemented, there needs to be an awful lot of fine-tuning to see that it does what it's supposed to do without having any unwanted residual impact on areas where you don't want them. So this is sort of my answer is like yes, but no. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking along the lines of, and I don't know if this is possible, but each phone has a special ID in it. And I wonder whether you could just ban connection to the network based on the phone's ID. And for those people that need a phone in the network, maybe their phones are in a separate database, a bit like we have with levels in the UK. I know that the emergency services are much higher up the level than say people like me for using the system. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, unfortunately, we haven't been given the details of how they expect this to work technically. So points like you make about MAC address blocking, etc., or the equivalent, whatever that term is in cell terms, unlikely to be what they're doing. They're probably going to try and jam a complete range of frequencies because, of course, a cell phone, or especially a smartphone, which has probably been smuggled in by a guard and supplied for a high price to whatever leader in the prison, because unfortunately there are corrupt guards as well. That could be using one of 5, 6 different possible bands, so bands of frequencies. So all of those frequencies would have to be blocked. In addition to that, they would also have to block, I expect, the 2.3 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi bands, because, of course, if these smartphones could get access to a router from somebody outside of the prison, where they've got an antenna, a directional antenna on the router pointing towards the prison, they could then use, obviously, everything on the internet. So also internet calling, be it Wi-Fi calling or be it over one of the social media networks. So it's a hard one. If the prison is located out in the middle of a desert, it's not so bad. But if these prisons are actually in cities, then there will be, I can't see any way that they can completely isolate the jamming signal to within the prison itself. One thought crossed my mind when Martin, you started to say, well, yeah, these phones have an ID. These phones nowadays also have the automatic emergency alert system built into them. Again, I'm talking smartphones. I wonder if there is any way that system could be modified by Apple and by Google so that these phones, when they go into a certain area, are physically disabled by the signal they receive. So something similar to what you can have with a handy talkie, where you can have a kill signal sent to it from a central location, which turns off or even destroys the transceiver. Destroys as in stops it working, it doesn't blow up or anything. So technically there could be solutions, but my understanding of what I've read so far, this is just going to be a noisy transmitter that's going to block many, many, many frequencies and probably affect the people in the area as well. Yeah, as Caryn said, yes, we want to stop the ability of phone calls coming out of the prison from the prisoners, but we don't want to affect, for example, the handy talkies or the walkie-talkies that the guards are using. So technically it's going to be a problem. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as you say, it's a technical problem with... we understand why they want to do it. It's a technical problem. Well, the only prison I've been to, and this was in the States, was Joliet Prison on Route 66, where they filmed the Blues Brothers. That prison is absolutely massive ground footprint. It must be nearly 1/4 of a mile square. Maybe not much, maybe a little bit less than that, but it's huge. You'd have to have either a mega transmitter there or lots of little transmitters all over the place trying to kill signals off. And anybody who lived close to that prison would probably also have their phones blocked. So an interesting one. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this?
2 thoughts went through my head when I read this. The first one was very similar to what Caryn said, although in my mind the example wasn't grandma having a medical incident in the car park. It was members of staff working there 5 days a week who might need to make or receive mobile phone calls. For example, in the office where I work, which isn't particularly huge compared to some, it's not at all unusual to hear colleagues within earshot of me taking calls from the school where the school needs the colleague to go up there and pick up their child who's been taken ill, for example, or to get a phone call from an elderly relative who, I don't know, might have fallen over at home or been admitted to hospital or needs certain items delivering after work, that kind of thing. So my first thought was, well, okay, yes, this jammer would take out the type of calls that you don't want to have, but it would also probably impact on employees working there as well, unless there were some kind of landline systems available. And the second thought was to do with other radio communications and systems. Most prisons, I would guess, use radios, walkie-talkies of some type, so you would need to make sure that this system didn't take out those frequencies, and if that was the case, then that would open up the possibility for the inmates to use those frequencies, perhaps, rather than using mobile phones. And I know for a fact that there has been at least one prison breakout in England that was arranged via walkie-talkies. Yes, okay, it was very many decades ago, the 1960s from memory, and I think it was 27 megs that was being used. And yes, fair enough, there weren't hundreds of thousands of CCTV cameras all over the place. But if that happened once, then it's a pretty surefire bet that it happened more than once. So everything goes full circle if you wait long enough. So maybe if mobile phones got knocked out, prison inmates would turn to radios or even bugs that are much lower in frequency that wouldn't be affected by this jamming. For example, 15 or so years ago, a friend of mine who was very much into radio of all types showed me a fully functioning Papermate pen that, to all intents and purposes, just looked like a pen, nothing more, nothing less. And inside that there was a microphone and a very low power radio transmitter that put its signal out somewhere between the top of airband and the bottom of 2 meters. I think it was around 140 megs or so. So I think if prisons do introduce this jamming for mobile phones, they would do well at the same time to also increase their scrutiny and surveillance of any local strong transmissions that are happening at UHF or VHF. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. It sounds like, people who make spectrum analyzers are going to make a bit of money on that if they went down that route. Dan, have we left you anything else to say on this one?
Well, yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue into my comments. It seems to me that instead of just brute force jamming, why doesn't somebody set up a system to monitor these cell phone transmissions and, I don't know, find out who people are talking to and take whatever appropriate measures are necessary. It seems to me you could even set up a system to do a little direction finding to figure out where the cell phones are being used within a facility, at least within a certain small radius, and catch the perpetrators. I mean, we have such fancy SDR technology. It just seems to me that something would be like that would be possible.
Yeah, I'd hope so. Yeah, some interesting comments on this, saying whether jamming's the right way to do it, but certainly these people do need to be refused access to technology of this type. Okay, moving to our next news story. Caryn, I'm going to give you this one again because you passed the story to me. But a big Dxpedition win for an African teen. Would you like to go first on it?
Oh, absolutely. This is great. Urgent Jerry is the name of this teenager. He is one of very few people who have a ham radio license in Malawi, which doesn't have a formal ham radio program the way most countries do. So it's a victory that he has a license at all, but through a program run by Don Jones, he has become licensed, and this program is designed to cultivate ham radio in Malawi. It is much needed. A lot of Africa does not have a robust amateur radio community. So here's this 17-year-old with quite an aptitude for amateur radio and quite a devotion to it, and some accomplishments in his maybe 2 or 3 years of being licensed. And he will be going to Andaman Island on a Dxpedition. How many people wait forever to get on one of those and have to really rack up track record? And he will be one of the youth operators. He might be the main youth operator for the team going there. And this is next year. It'll be around this time next year. That's just outstanding. He originally when he got his license, he got a foreign license, I believe a United States license, and was able, because of that, to then apply for and get the license for his home country. At the age of 17, to be able to do this and to show other young people, and I want to emphasize young people, because yes, young people love amateur radio, they do, to show them that this is possible, not just to get a license, get on the air and do the things that most of us folks do without ever doing anything extravagant. That itself is fabulous. But for him to go with a team of experienced Dxpeditioners and get on an island and experience the pileups and the challenges, the physical and mental challenges of being on a Dxpedition, and the thrill of that is quite a thing. We want to see more of that, and hopefully we will. He's the pride, I'm sure, of his family, and he's certainly the pride of his country. And we look forward to hearing more about him. Urgent Jerry. So remember that name. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it's good when we can cover a story of a youngster. Now, Dan, his Elmer, I believe, is a man called Dan Jones, who you actually know.
Right. So I have a personal connection to this story. I met with Don Jones at Dayton last year, and this fellow has done a remarkable job setting up a program to educate youth in Malawi in a lot of technical topics, not just radio, but also computers. And he's managed to get funds from several different amateur radio groups, including the ASME Foundation and the North Carolina DX Foundation. And I've been trying to work with him a little bit on getting him an ARDC grant for his program as well. So I can't say enough about the fellow Don Jones, who's really done an incredible job here in Malawi. And situation is really, I mean, it's amazing in a way. I mean, Malawi does not have a lot of amateur radio operators. They don't have a really formal setup like we do here in the U.S. They're not even a part of the International Amateur Radio Union because there's just not that many amateur radio operators there. And part of what Don is trying to do is to get them to be a part, set up a national organization, and then get them to be part of the IARU, and then make it easier for people to get licenses there. We complain about the $35 for 10 years, fee for 10 years of license here in the U.S. I forget exactly the amount, but it's something like $100, $150 per year there to hold an amateur radio license, which of course is just out of the bounds of most people in Malawi. So, like I say, I can't say enough about Don Jones and the work he's doing there, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get him an ARDC grant to continue his work in Malawi. And also, he's working in the Comoros Islands. So there are two countries that he's trying to promote amateur radio in.
Well, it's good you've given us an extra insight into this one, Dan, and it's surprising how many people we meet and we go around, isn't it? But good one from your point, Dan. Right. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I haven't got a lot to add. The 17-year-old there is doing very well indeed. Within a year, he's got, 160 or 170 DXCC contacts. So in other words, he's obviously, as Caryn said, very interested in the hobby and a real go-getter. And great that he's got a place on a Dxpedition to expand his experience of amateur radio even more. And let's hope he's one of many to come. I'm just looking on the map where Malawi is, and it's east of Zambia and north of Mozambique, so and south of Tanzania. So if people want to know where that is, so on the eastern part of Africa. Yeah, so small-ish country, but not actually small. So, the fact that they don't have a national society because they haven't got enough radio amateurs yet to justify that. Hopefully that changes in years to come as well. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it'd be good. And by getting youngsters in the hobby earlier, and hopefully he'll stay in the hobby, he'll promote it to other people in the country. Edmund, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Well, I'm feeling very much in the shade here because I learned the truth at 17, with apologies to Janice Ian. When I was that age, I had discovered that amateur radio existed, but despite me wanting to get a license, my parents said no. My studies were the most important thing I'd ever done because I was still at school at the time, and I think they had some justification in saying that. So at 17, I was nowhere close to obtaining an amateur radio license, let alone going on a Dxpedition, let alone being licensed in a country where obtaining an amateur license is or was relatively difficult or not straightforward anyway. So this is very, very impressive. I just hope that his enthusiasm will carry on for many years or decades to come, and that he won't have shone so brightly age 17 and done so much and had so much enthusiasm that his light shines really, really, really brightly for a short period and then goes out prematurely. But hopefully that won't happen, and he'll be doing great things in the hobby for very many years to come. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as I say, we're all pleased this gentleman has got his license at 17 and he's doing well, so best of luck to you, sir. Right, move to our next news story. Hams are needed to track the NASA moon mission. Now, in fairness, I'm sure NASA could track it without any involvement of us. However, this is something that us amateurs can do and can help, and it's a bit of fun. And I often say, doing something for fun has got to be worth doing. Ed, I'm going to let you go first on this one. What do you think?
Okay, well, just on the point you just made there, Martin, I'll take the third paragraph in the story. It says, targeted for no later than April 2026, the mission will rely on NASA's Near Space Network and Deep Space Network for primary communications and tracking support throughout its launch, orbit, and re-entry. However, with a growing focus on commercialization, NASA wants to further understand industry's tracking capabilities. So that paragraph there is suggesting that NASA is not only looking to the amateur radio area, but to businesses to come along and help them where they can outsource their tracking requirements. So, in a roundabout way, it might be a way that perhaps if amateurs get involved with this, they can look to get jobs in companies that do this kind of thing for NASA in the future. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, and in fairness, us amateurs do love what's going on in space quite often. Edmund, have you got any thoughts on this one?
Well, I assume it will be telemetry, and I assume it will be in bands that I'm not currently equipped to receive. I did have a cursory glance around to see if I could find any specific frequencies mentioned, and I didn't spot any, but I've got a feeling this isn't going to be in 2 meters or 70 centimeters, for example. But I will keep an eye on it when we get nearer to the time, and when that information does become available, if indeed it isn't available already and I've just managed to miss it, when I know what's involved, I will actually try my best to receive some of these signals. Back to you, Martin.
Just going to hop in and say there, it's the S-band they're using.
Right, okay, so the S-band they're using, so those who've got receivers in that area will be able to listen. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, it doesn't float my boat, but I think it's a great thing. As Ed mentioned, folks that are doing this might be able to say, "Hey, I got some experience with this. Let me give me a job." But I also just note that hams have had a long experience with satellites and such. This first Sputnik was sent out its beep on 15 to 15 meter band and was observed by many hams back in the 1950s. So I just certainly think it's a win-win for everybody. And maybe this will even spur some hams to get on those S-band frequencies.
I think so, Dan. I think so. And I think, people need a purpose sometimes to do this stuff. And this could be new missions to the moon, could just actually be a good purpose to get people playing with these frequencies and listening and doing all the other things. Caryn, have I left you anything to say on this one?
Just one thing, really. Yes, it is a continuation of amateur radio's long association with adventures in space. I am sort of hoping, and the thought entered my mind when I first saw this story, sort of hoping this engages a lot of younger people, because they not only will be alive and well, we hope, during the moon mission, but we hope the Mars mission that would follow some years later. Young people are very drawn, many of them are very drawn to anything space related, and ham radio certainly is the path to careers at NASA or some related industries. So I think this could light a fire under some of the younger hams who want to keep track of this and be a part of something much, much bigger than just Colin CQ from a Poda Park or their own shack. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think you're right, Caryn, because I remember back in the very late 60s, early 70s, the space going to the moon. And before anybody says to me, we didn't go to the moon, it was all a theory. Yes, we did. And the reason we went to the moon was because we could track with radio. The onboard lunar lander didn't actually have a computer. It had little more than a calculator on board, and comms was done back to back to Earth. So there was radio comms all the time. Now, if the Americans hadn't have gone to the moon, the Russians would have screamed holy murder on the situation, because there was a space race between the US and Russia to get to the moon. So I do honestly believe we went to the moon. Some of the pictures that have been shown later have been certainly cleaned up and one thing and another, but anybody who saw the raw television images must believe we went there after what I've just said. And kind of, I always worry a little bit about, as I was saying before we started, this trip to Mars. You're out in space. You've not got an atmosphere around you. You're out in the radiation belt. How are you going to survive going to Mars? I'm going to let Caryn go first on this one, because you said, well, that was a good lead in to a first for ham radio operators at a nuclear cleanup site. What do you think of that one, Caryn?
Well, I think the time has come to recognize that we're not just good for natural disasters, we're awfully useful for unnatural disasters. And nuclear cleanup, a lot of things can go wrong with anything nuclear. And these cleanup sites, while everything, the remediation is all being done according to schedule and according to certain procedures, the Department of Energy did find the wisdom to say, hey, in addition to what we've got in place here, and in coordination with the local emergency management agencies, let's call in some ham radio operators, because our communication system that we've been using in these emergency drills all along, they might not always work. And so the hams were invited, and it was a successful exercise. And I think this is going to now become part of a more formal program where the hams are part of the scene. I can't think of a better way to recognize how the deployment of hams can really make a difference sometimes, especially so much of everything now is increasingly nuclear. So good deal. I was very happy. This was, by the way, in Paducah, Kentucky, I should say where that is. And it is one of several such sites around the country. It wasn't just an isolated incident. There are a number of sites around the country that have to conduct nuclear cleanup such as this. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it's a good job they are practicing. Hopefully it'll never, ever get used to practice, but it gives you a warm feeling if you have actually done some practicing. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, this is a good thing, that's in our charter, right, to provide emergency communications. And like Caryn says, let's hope it never really needed, but it's always good to practice because you never know.
Yeah, too right, Dan, too right. Okay, Edmund, I know this is a US story, but what's your thoughts on the principles?
Well, the amateur radio volunteers in this scenario, would they be expected to be at home and pass messages because communications locally had gone down, or would they be expected to attend the site? Because if it's the latter, good luck finding volunteers for that. If I was even if I was an absolute die-hard member of RayNet, or what's the equivalent in the US? Is it Aries or Races or something like that? I think even if I was prepared to get involved with absolutely everything else, running headlong towards a nuclear power station where there had been an incident with a two-way radio in my hand, I think I would seriously consider drawing the line at that for fairly obvious reasons, Martin.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it could be operating from home or from a secure location. And in some ways, in a disaster situation, I always think all bets are off. And so what if you haven't got a license? If you're doing something that's trying to help people in a life-threatening environment, then probably that's the right thing to do. And I'll probably have Ofcom chase me for saying that one. But anyway, Ed, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Just throw an idea in there, which is actually a question that I put to the representative about 45 years ago in England when I was a member of the local RANET group, a representative of the emergency officer for the region. Then we were talking about possible radiation leaks from a planned power station or the chance of nuclear war. Both comes under the same hat. And my question then, and it still is now, is do we have any records that can tell us what happens to radio communications when there is an atomic explosion? Looking on the famous internet, I'm reading here, it says, yes, a nuclear explosion significantly affects radio communications through an electromagnetic pulse, EMP, and atmospheric ionization. An EMP, a burst of radio waves, can damage and disable electronic equipment over a vast area, where they're talking over, depending how high it happens, possibly thousands of miles. So your first problem is your radios won't work because the electronics is destroyed in them. But the other thing that affects is that the atmospheric ionization will cause a radio blackout. So if you're considering HF frequencies where you want to bounce off the ionosphere to get signals out of the area, it won't work. There will be a radio blackout across the whole of the HF bands when you have, let's say, not just a leak, but an actual explosion as happened at Chernobyl. You will not be able to use radios, or at least that's how I read this. Where's the research? Where's the documentation that will work? Maybe VHF will work. Maybe microwave will work. Maybe HF won't work. You know, it's all right putting your plans in place and saying, well, we'll fall back to amateur radio if our cell phones stop working or whatever. That's one thing. But in a nuclear situation, will any radio work? That's the question. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I've forgotten about EM pulses, and if you've got a valve radio, you'll survive. Any semiconductors probably won't, if you're fairly close. I mean, valves, or tubes as you call them in the States, will just have a hiccup and then carry on working. But there aren't that many valve tube equipment about, and even if there is, there's often semiconductors within them as well. So a little bit of a worry. Interesting though, we can't just say no, we're not going to try it. I hope it doesn't happen, that's all. But
I mean, the people that are requesting this help from amateur radio have to be able to provide the documents to say, or if they don't want to say anything because of the Official Secrets Act or whatever, they at least should look into it to see whether it's even worth engaging in a different radio service, be it amateur radio or some commercial company or whatever, if their scientific reports tell them that if we have a explosion at the nuclear power station, forget all radio communications. But if we have a leak, then you're okay, sort of thing, as in radio will work. That needs to be done before any of these sort of agreements are put in place, I would say.
Yeah. It's a matter of finding out, isn't it? Finding out what is required. All right, that concludes our news stories for today. Let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke to them. And we always go ladies first, Caryn. So what have you been playing with?
Well, I took not a little drive. I took a longer than usual drive and went back in radio history, which is something I have been wanting to do for a while. I drove out east to it's called the David A. Sarnoff Nature Preserve, and it is located in Riverhead, New York. I did a POTA activation there. It's a POTA site, and I was there for about an hour or so. The conditions were good. I was not calling as Kilo Delta 2 Golf Uniform Tango. I was activating the call sign Kilo 0 Delta Oscar Golf K0DOG for the Dog Day Radio Amateur Radio Club, which is the new club that we formed after International Dog Day. And I wanted to put that on the air and get that call sign out there. It was a great day. What I love about that preserve is its connection to history. It had been donated to the local authorities as a location that could become a nature preserve for the government, well, for the public, really. The Radio Corporation of America was headed by David Sarnoff for a very long time, and this particular parcel of 2,700 acres was home to an array of antennas, all kinds of antennas that the RCA used for a very long time. When that site was no longer needed, that's when David Sarnoff decided it should be donated. So there was my ham radio antenna. Felt so proud of my ham radio antenna out there at the site where RCA had done so many of its broadcasts. It was pretty cool. So I enjoyed that, had a really nice day, got to play radio at a site that had some historic significance. So the next day, I kind of chilled out. I stayed home, and in the back garden, I took out the KX2, and we set up there and basically just had some fun chasing POTA on 10 watts. Again, all of this CW. In this case, I was using my regular call sign. I think after a big adventure like I had had the day before, I felt I should just put my feet up and enjoy a little back garden POTA hunting. Unfortunately, I got eaten by mosquitoes, even though it is autumn now. Those bugs are still hungry. So I caution everybody, it's not over yet. Beyond that, nothing much else. But I did want to tell you guys about this because I was really super excited about the Sarnoff Preserve. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you told me it was mosquitoes because I thought you were being bothered by squirrels. Hi. Oh dear.
Actually, I do want to jump in and tell you, yeah, you can run, but you cannot hide. You know, when you're out at a public park and the local squirrels don't know you, you can really do pretty well. Back behind my house, they do know me, and even though I wasn't anywhere near the house, they did find me. So I brought my KX2, I brought my key, I brought my battery, I brought my antenna, I brought my POTA 33 mast, and I brought a big container of almonds. And it was empty by the time I finished 90 minutes out there on the radio. So yeah, I wouldn't say they bothered me. They just, shall we say, made requests. But they were polite requests. The mosquitoes bothered. Thanks for remembering, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. As I say, I didn't realise it was mosquitoes on your email to me the other day. But I'm glad you enjoyed yourself on that one. Dan, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, unlike Caryn, I actually haven't done much POTA in the last month. I hit 2,000 QSOs from my park here, US 3322, and I sort of tailed off on going out to the park. But I still have done quite a bit here. Actually, I taught a class a couple weeks ago, and as a result, at least 12 have gotten licensed. We had a display at the local makerspace called MakerWorks here in Ann Arbor, and we demonstrated amateur radio. I participated in that. Technically, on the technical side of things, a friend of mine has purchased a model DL24 electronic load. And this is actually kind of an amusing little device that we're going to use to test batteries with. You can set it up for whatever kind of current you want to draw from a battery, and it'll measure the output of the battery. So if you've got a 9 amp hour battery, you can test it to see that it really is a 9 amp hour battery or not. And the amazing thing about this, like all this Chinese electronics, it only costs about $50. Actually less than that, $50 or less. I did an Amazon search here before the taping, and I saw prices ranging anywhere from $35 to $70 for this thing. But it's really kind of an amazing device. And one of the reasons I haven't been doing POTA, I'll just give a quick bowling report. I think last month I reported that I bought a new bowling ball, and I've been using it to great effect. I have a 195 average, which is pretty good, and shooting for a 200 average by the end of the season. So that's that.
Yeah, well, the only time I went bowling, I did the Barnes-Wallis method. Yeah, the bouncing bomb down, and you get thrown out very quickly. Sorry, I behaved myself. Okay. Edmund, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Not very much radio-wise. I took part in 145 Alive on Saturday the 27th of September and managed to work 13 stations, unlucky. But I was only on high ground for the second half of it. I was playing taxi duties that day, so I dropped my wife and stepdaughter off at the theatre in Brighton because there was something they wanted to see, and then got up to high ground for literally the second half, the last 90 minutes of the event. And because it's not a contest, the start and end times aren't set in stone. So because they were busy enjoying the show in Brighton and then going for something to eat afterwards, I stayed in my location near Woodingdean, well beyond the official 3 o'clock end time, and ended up working about 5 or 6 more people. So a little tip there: if you're taking part in a radio event that's not a contest, then it can be worth staying on the band after the official finishing time, and you might find some more people to talk to. Coming up, there's going to be another 145 Alive in the very near future on Saturday the 11th of October, to coincide with the first day of the RSGB convention. The call sign Golf Bravo, I think it's Golf Bravo 3 Hotel Quebec, will be on the air from the site of the convention in Milton Keynes, and there's a push to get nets going on 2 meters FM simplex, not just close by to the convention, but all across the UK. So I don't think I'll be involved in that one, but if you are available that day, and especially if you can get up to high ground somewhere, then it might be fun to take part. There's more information on the 145 Alive Facebook group. Elsewhere, on the 60 metre band, 5 megahertz, on the weekend of the 18th and 19th of October, there's the next edition of Exercise Blue Ham. That's the same weekend as Jamboree on the Air, incidentally. That's probably why they chose that date. And on those days, on 60 metres, anybody can listen to 60 metres, of course, but in the UK you need to hold a full licence if you're going to transmit. There will be Air Cadet stations on the band that we can legally work and communicate with, as long as they're calling on amateur frequencies, of course. If they are talking to each other elsewhere on 5 megs, then we're not allowed to work them there. But if they're calling on amateur frequencies we can. They don't call CQ, they call Alpha Charlie, which I imagine stands for Air Cadets, and the call signs almost always start with Mike Romeo Echo MRE, followed by some numbers and a letter, and it's very sort of regimented radio procedure as you would expect. There's no rag chewing, and you don't get given names or exact locations, and you won't get signal reports like 5 and 9. You'll be told that you are strong readable, good readable, unreadable, whatever the report may be. And then the QSO finishes not with 73, but with the word out. And then they move on to the next one. So that's happening on that weekend, as I say, but there's also an event called Exercise Cloud Warmer, which is happening in theory 7 days a week up until the 31st of December. I suspect it won't be happening very much on weekends. It's more likely to be weekdays rather. But the idea is for a 15-minute window, it's that brief, 15 minutes, from 7:45 p.m. till 8 p.m. Air Cadet stations will be on the 60-metre band. So I have clipped some wire extensions onto my 40-metre dipole to turn it into a 60-metre dipole, and I'm going to try and work some of these, which will be hard because I've got a colossal amount of QRM from the neighbouring houses on that band. But I've tested my system by working a few stations all over Europe using FT8, so my antenna is working, and I'll let you know how I get on. And if anybody else listening to this manages to work any of them, then I'd be very pleased to hear how you get on. And there's more information available if you go to Google or your favourite search engine and type in Exercise Cloud Warmer as 3 separate words. You should find it straight away. That's it. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds like you're going to be busy in the next few weeks, so good one. Ed, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, well, I'll start with something that actually both Caryn and Edmund were involved in. Or actually, Edmund couldn't make it, but he sent his comments in. We had an after-the-event meeting for the International Dog Day and Cat Day events, and to plan what we can do better next year, what didn't work this year, etc. So that was a positive closure to this year's event, and we're going to be starting organising for next year, starting about March time for the event in August, or the events in August. I've finished writing a book I've been working on. I've developed some improvements for some of my portable radios, and some of those I've been using on a few POTA activations over the last couple of weeks, actually, because there's been several new POTA parks added to the POTA system in Germany. So where Dan's saying his local park, I can't say that anymore. I've probably got the choice within half an hour reach of maybe 6 or 7 parks and 4 or 5 trails. So no, maybe not 6 or 7 parks, 6 or 7 entities made up of parks or trails is probably what I should say. So, operating POTA around here is becoming a fairly easy thing to do, which is nice. While the home station, before the winter arrives, the 40-metre sky loop and also the loop on the ground have both had maintenance done because the items have broken on them. So hopefully that's going to get me through the winter. I don't want to be having to take the antenna down and work on it in the ice and snow here. And that's about it. So back over to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds like you've been busy, mate. Sounds like you've been busy and enjoyed yourself. Well, I actually been fiddling, not much on the air, the usual stuff. I have worked people mobile while I've been out in the car, and I have put a few calls through the talk group, and I had a few contacts in the talk group, not very many. But what else have I been doing? Well, I mentioned, I think, a few weeks back that I got a couple of QRP guys, no-tune MFED half-wave antenna modules, and I've cut some antenna wire now for them. So we're going to give that a go, hopefully on Sunday. Reason I can't do it Saturday is Colin's over for football, so I'm being dragged to soccer. Also, I mentioned that I've got a QMX Plus for my birthday. I'm not rushing it. I'm thoroughly enjoying just fiddling with it and doing bits and pieces. But I got one of my colleagues at the club to put it on the air for me on CW on Monday night. And its first CW call it got answered was a station in Italy. And okay, people say, oh, Italy's easy, but we are probably the right skip distance to it. 630 miles on 4 watts, 630 miles. And it was a 599 report from the station. So quite pleased about that. And Julian, the guy who worked at the Italian station, said, yeah, it was working well. I found an old ATU project kit I was building some time ago, and I ruined the bit of paper which went on the front of the box, which labelled it. And I basically lost interest. And I found it the other day, and I've got it out and been fiddling with that. And that now works okay. So it's got some strange labels on it at the moment, but at least I know what it does. As I say, mainly just playing with the QMX Plus, in fairness. I had great fun with that. And the only other thing I've been up to, which has taken quite a bit of my time, I've migrated computer systems. So I'm on a much faster computer with much more memory. I'm wonderful. I'm a Linux user. I'm really pleased that Mr. Microsoft has decided to withdraw support for Windows 10, because this computer is an absolutely Goliath machine that was given to me because it won't run Windows 11. And absolutely, I mean, just give you an idea, it's an i7. It's got 32 gig of RAM, a 1 terabyte solid state drive. I've also put a 4 terabyte drive in it as well, and a phenomenal graphics card that's got cooling on it, with like tubes with cooling fluid running around it. Not that I'm a big graphics person, and basically because it wouldn't run Windows 11. My result, I think. Anyway, that's what I've been up to. So there we go. All that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys for turning up, and it's been a great evening. I'd like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
Always a pleasure, Martin, even with a couple of laughs thrown in.
We certainly have a laugh. I know people would like to listen to our outtakes and our giggles, and if we ever went live, they would hear it. But sometimes we do get a bit naughty, I suppose. So we need to keep our clean rating, or I need to keep it anyway. I'd also like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, my pleasure as usual. This session was truly a blast.
Yeah, and for those of you who didn't understand what some of the giggles were about, I was saying to Dan just before we hit the go button, you know, people think all podcasters hate each other and one thing or another, and people like bad news. And I said, if we said mine and Dan had a stand-up row before the podcast, I said this episode would get even more downloads than it normally does. So that's where we were giggling on that one. And I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
No problems at all, Edmund, and enjoy your next few weeks on the air. I'd also like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP.
Yep, thanks for the invite as always. And you're going to have to explain to me that other joke before we started. I still don't understand why it's funny.
Okay, I'll explain it when we let it go, because I might get us into trouble. So I'll say 73s to you all, and we'll move to the next part of the podcast. 73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief for me, Colin M6BLY. We start off with news here of two Aeris Slow Scan TV events. One planned for this weekend of our release, the weekend of the 3rd to the 6th of October, and it's going to be commemorating the launch of Sputnik in 1957. And then in a couple of weekends' time, on the 17th to 20th of October, there's going to be a Scout-themed images will be transmitted to coincide with the International Scouting Jamboree event. The images will be transmitted using the PD120 mode on 145.800 MHz. So we'll pop a link to you so you can check out more about the start and times and the availability for this on ICQPodcast.com. In the UK, the regulator Ofcom is proposing changes to the way that certain licenses are granted to satellites. Ofcom is hoping to improve the licensing procedures that were introduced in 2021, covering non-geostationary satellites, orbit systems used by businesses, individuals and other entities, particularly in remote areas. The regulator opened a consultation earlier this month and is seeking comments up to the 18th of November. So they've issued a number of networks and gateway licenses for these systems, and they believe it's time to work towards a swifter decision-making process. So certainly check this out if they say that's of interest to yourself, and you can make any recommendations to Ofcom. Two updates from WRTC 2026. So the first is I'd say the referees have been chosen for the event. They had many more applicants than needed, and say they've whittled down the applicants down to a group that will be helping out the team. Far too many to say on the air, but they will certainly put this on ICQPodcast.com for you to check this out. Say about all the referees that will be helping out the team there in that event. They've also as well picked the HQ and hotel packages, etc. for contestants have been announced, and they're going to be using the Cambridgeshire town of St Neots for the location of the HQ, and say for the contestants to house themselves in overnight. So I say two updates there from WRTC 2026 taking place obviously in the UK next year. Right, now we head over to our features episode, and we really hope you enjoy this interview with Allan Wiener as he discusses WBCQ station. I hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hello, everybody. This is Frank, K4FMH, with another feature for the ICQ podcast. Today, I'm going to have on a very special guest, but I've got a partner. Martin M1MRB is taking a break from his terrorizing old ladies on Oxford Street, making them run out of Selfridges and the fire exits, saying there's a naughty toddler on the loose. Help me, help me. Martin, glad for you to join me today.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Frank. And it's not only me. It's not only me. When we get together, we've been accused of being naughty toddlers.
Yes, I'm missing in action from Selfridges, although I did watch the PBS special on Mr. Selfridge, so I was there in spirit.
Yeah, no problem.
Good. And today we've got a very special guest. Martin, I don't know if you remember some of the one-hit wonder bands from the 1960s, but I believe a guy named Bobby Fuller had at least this hit, and it was I Fought the Law and the Law Won. Does that ring a bell, Martin?
It rings a bell. I mean, I couldn't have told you who done it, but in fairness, I remember the song being out, and I've heard it many times on various radio stations.
Well, yeah. I'm a recovering DJ, and a few of those things stick in your head, just like the needle stuck on the record at some time. But our guest today fought the law, and the law won temporarily. However, he won in the long run, and that's the major part of this person's life story. And I'm going to give an homage to one of my heroes in AM broadcasting, John Landecker, and record truly was was his grandmother's name, and it became his middle name. Our featured guest today is the owner, originator, creator, and procrastinator of WBCQ Radio, Allan Wiener. Allan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks.
For our listeners, most of you probably know about WBCQ, and you may know a fair amount about Allan Wiener. Allan wrote a book, Access to the Airwaves, and that came out, I believe, in 97. And although this is audio only, I'm holding a copy. I have read it several times. A lot of interesting stories about a young person growing up with a love of radio. And when the Radio Caroline episode happened over in England, Allan followed suit over here in the States. We'll talk maybe just a little about that. That's only part of his life story. He spent the rest of his life, after getting a bona fide certified FCC license to broadcast shortwave, he's gotten into other areas of commercial broadcast. But Allan, tell our listeners just a little bit about WBCQ shortwave, and wow, what a gargantuan antenna you've got. People talk about steerable arrays. You actually have a steering wheel on that thing. It's huge.
Well, WBCQ is a very unique station. We broadcast on international shortwave, but we also have a local AM and FM station that serves the northern Maine area. I believe we're the only AM, FM, and international shortwave station in the United States. We are privately owned, myself and my wife, Angela, and we provide and have provided for well over 25 years a platform for people to buy airtime and get on the air and broadcast worldwide under the umbrella of free speech radio, whatever they care to broadcast, be it religious, be it political, music, any type of commentary, entertainment, and that's what we do. And we use the international shortwave bands to do it. And yes, Frank and Martin, the history of WBCQ is steeped in argmati, yes, pirate radio, and getting on the air as young people to express our distaste of the war in Vietnam and other political things. We took to the air back in the 60s and 70s, and we got on unused AM and FM and shortwave frequencies and broadcasted to a hungry world. And it's funny, Frank, when I reflect on it now, being a lot older, when we were doing the pirate thing out of New York and Yonkers, New York, and New York City back in the late 60s and 70s, we were rebellious youth trying to change the world and make it more peaceful and stop the fighting and stop the wars and stop the aggression. Gee, that sounds kind of similar to what's going on today. Nothing, as our Lord said, there's nothing new under the sun. And WBCQ is the culmination of that. And yeah, we fought the law. The FCC has the absolute right to be the traffic cops. They have the right to regulate the airwaves, which is a limited resource. So there is not a cacophony of signals and interference to vital services. They have that right. They don't have the right to limit free speech. They don't have the right for program content, but they do have the right to act as a traffic cop. And yeah, we fought it. And we even, just as a quick history, we even took a radio ship legally off the coast of Long Island, New York, back in the mid to late 80s, 1987, summer of 1987, to broadcast free radio to a New York City audience. And of course, back then, radio was it. That was the electronic internet of the time, was radio broadcasting. Radio and TV were it. And the people that controlled it, the moneyed and corporate interests, were very exclusive back then. Very difficult to get into the broadcasting club, especially in the New York City area. Very expensive. So we took the free speech situation that Radio Caroline, Radio London, a lot of offshore broadcasters in the 60s took. We got a ship, went out in international territory, and started broadcasting. of course, the government had other ideas, and they have a lot more money and might than we do. And they came in with basically a hammer and anvil and tried to squash us. So we decided, after fighting with all that for years and years in the courts, we decided to go the licensed route. And henceforth, WBCQ International Shortwave is what is on the air now, the direct descendant of all that free radio broadcasting back from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we're glad to be on shortwave. It's a very, very, very special medium, connecting peoples all over the world. And yes, we use multi-million-dollar antennas. There's actually two WBCQs. There's the Superstation on 9330 kilohertz, which uses the fantastic Ampagon 4-4 totally rotatable curtain array antenna, a wonder of the antenna world. And then there's the classic side of WBCQ that we built back in the late 90s, which uses more conventional rhombic curtain arrays, log periodic antennas, and transmitters that belong in the Smithsonian. So it's a mixture. And our main thing now is to keep costs down, because the cost of electricity has skyrocketed, and it affects us because electricity is our biggest expense. And our job is to get as many voices on the air, good old analog presentation, to a world that is slowly being screened, digitaled, and AI into some weird oblivion that Frank and Martin, we're kind of the older generation that's trying to fathom it all. And me, you know, it's like a Model T Ford. You'll be able to operate a Model T Ford 100 years from now, 200 years from now. A digital nightmare? No. An analog radio, an analog broadcasting station like WBCQ, we can be here forever and maintain a direct connection to you out there in the audience. The digital world, the TikTok world, the Snapchat world, the X world, I don't know. I don't know about that. Someday AI might say no more. So we'll see. But how's that for an intro?
That's a terrific intro. Martin, you and I are within 1 year of each other. I often tease Martin Allen by telling him I'm his elder. I'm about 8 months or so older than Martin. Martin, you remember Radio Carolina and what it was like. What are your thoughts from the other side of the pond?
Okay. I remember Radio Caroline going on air, and it must have been Easter time, I believe, in 1964. I was 11 years old. I was really taken by it and thoroughly enjoyed it. A few months after Radio Caroline, we had Radio London, which was an American minesweeper, and pretty much was run by an American company. And they were far more professional than Radio Caroline. And I know people are going to slap me for saying this, but it was certainly good up until around about the summer of 67, when the government literally put the kibosh on all the sea-based pirates. Although Radio Caroline did carry on its own, it wasn't never the same again. As things had gone on in the 1970s, there used to be a land-based pirate called Radio Jackie in London, and they used to literally have a pram and a transmitter, and somebody put an aerial up in a tree, and they'd run round, plug it into the aerial, push the tape recorder's button and play an hour, and then they pack up quick and move somewhere else, and then another group would be playing the next hour somewhere else because they didn't want to get caught by the locals. So, like Alan says, it was an interesting time. I was asked to get involved with that. I chickened out in some ways because I always try and do the honest thing. Later on, Radio Jackie now has been through various raids and bits and pieces, now holds a proper FM license in the UK. And a couple of years ago, I did some work for a FM broadcast company looking after transmitters, rebuilding them, that sort of thing, Frank. I also, believe it or not, ended up actually fixing a couple of Radio Caroline's broadcast transmitters, because in the local area around Colchester, they actually transmit land-based FM now, and I fixed a couple of theirs while I was at the transmitter company. So I've kind of been around it for a long time, but never actually got my grubby hands in broadcast radio.
Both sides of the pond, listening has been something that has promoted freedom. And if we take Allan's comments and kind of run them to present day, Texan is a company out of China that makes a lot of small shortwave radios. There was a claim they were stamping out 10,000 a day. I don't know if that's exaggerated or not. Let's just say they make a hell of a lot of them. One of the things Allan was talking about internet-based news, information, and broadcasting, it can certainly be filtered and it can be shut off. And we've seen that particularly in the developing world. Now, in the States and United Kingdom, we're at a different stage in our development. Same thing could happen. But when you begin to look at Africa, when you look at South America, when you look at the Middle East, and when you look at the East, suddenly you have populations that have different levels of authoritarianism and tyranny. That internet can come back to bite you because they can see where you've been. But, you know, it's hard to figure out where a dial on a radio has been, isn't it?
It certainly is. And Frank, our amateur radio license in the UK allows us to listen to amateur stuff, CB, broadcast radio, but in fairness, we're not supposed to listen to pirate radio, although there are quite a few in London all the time. We're not supposed to actually listen to aircraft or aircraft, police, fire, ambulance. Well, police, fire and ambulance are now. But it's quite strange because if you're at the end of a runway in one of the big Gatwick or Heathrow or whatever, there's people down there with scanners listening to the aircraft, and the police drive by and nobody stops them. It's one of these things, you're not allowed to do it, but it's so low down the prosecution list, nobody bothers. As long as you don't try and make advantage of what you hear, I think is where
right. And that's the regulation here in the state. Allan, on the notion that radio, you can't really figure out where people have been listening as a rule, and that frees you from the potential tyranny of the internet, do you steer your superstation to different audiences and places around the world depending on programming?
Yes, we do. Yeah, the great antenna, all 250 tons of it, rotates like a fine watch, and we are every couple of hours we change the beam width. We'll go to Europe, we'll go to the western part of North America, we'll beam towards the Middle Eastern countries, we'll beam towards South America at various times of the day when propagation, because propagation is very important on shortwave, as all you ham radio folks know that do high frequency, and it varies by time of day, time of year, etc. So we're constantly rotating the antennas to serve different areas and different language. Mainly a religious-based programming on 9330, World's Last Chance Ministry. They're the main client for that and they transmit their Bible teachings throughout the world. And of course, we have other transmitters, 7490, which has most of the variety of our programming. We'll have religious, music, political programs on that transmitter, and we have other transmitters that are leased occasionally by networks and other groups that want to cover the shortwaves and cover a worldwide audience. But that's the interesting thing of shortwave. Like, we got a letter a few months ago from a group of people that are somewhere in Guatemala, out in the middle of the jungle, no internet, no nothing, but they got a storage battery and they have a shortwave radio, literally up a tree in a tree house. And they listen to us. They pick us up during the day. And, they thanked us. They said, thank you for being there. And we hear that a lot. We get letters from people that don't have the internet, or they have it, but they don't care about it. They don't want to use it, but they have a small portable shortwave radio and they tune us in, same time every day. Sometimes the propagation is good. Sometimes it's a little weak, but the signal's usually always there. And they tune us in and they really appreciate us. And this is touching on what you said before, especially in countries that regulate their speech. You don't know when somebody is listening to us on a shortwave radio. There really is no way to verify that they're listening to this program on shortwave, whereas anything you do on a computer can be hacked and probably ends up at some storage data vault, in the middle of Utah for the NSA. And that is the beauty and the one-to-one nature of communications via high frequency. And radio in general, even AM and FM, it still is a very personal thing. It's one microphone to, millions and potentially billions of listening ears, because there are billions of shortwave radios. And Texan, I've heard the same thing, that their total output of radios, and they make AM, FM, shortwaves, all kinds of radios, portable, crank up, alt, table, they make all kinds of radios. And I have heard from people that visited their factory that, the daily output is about 10,000 a day. And I think that's really true. And, for fun, I get on eBay every once in a while, and I check what the latest shortwave radios are selling for. And it's amazing, all the shortwave receivers that are coming out. Some as little as $15 and some as expensive as $1,500. So there's a whole gamut of hardware. Plus there's the software-defined radios, which are becoming an incredible resource for people. Because now somebody with a computer can use software-defined radios anywhere in the world to pick up not only local AM and FM stations, but see what is on the shortwaves in their area. And we get a lot of listeners throughout the world. We have people from China listening to us because they tunnel into SDRs, here in America, to stream the audio coming from a receiver, say, in Pennsylvania, that's picking up our transmitters in northern Maine, and they're listening to it, in China. So there's all these different resources and all these different types of shortwave radios. And to me, it's a very viable, important asset for the infrastructure of the world, especially as we're racing like a bunch of crazy car drivers towards the Internet of Everything and artificial intelligence and bots controlling our life. So analog radio may become, analog radio may become the last batch of anything that is truthful and unfiltered and real. It may turn out to be that.
Yeah. Alan, go ahead, Martin.
No, sorry, Frank. You go.
Go ahead and make your comment. I was going to segue into a couple of things Alan said, so go ahead.
All right. So, Alan, I get where you're coming from, because I bought 25 plus years ago a Sony shortwave radio. Shortwave, it's got the VHF FM band, but it's also shortwave radio. I think it's a 76 IC 7600 or something like that. Brilliant radio. I've taken it all over the place with me. It also does SSB as well as AM, which is great because I can do amateur as well. However, when you listen to other parts of the world and you hear a different perspective, and I sometimes wonder whether we're told one thing in country A, and you listen to country B and country C's perspective. And if you have an open mind, it's a bit like management. You got two people come to you with a problem or a disciplinary. They both favour it in their benefit, but somewhere in the middle is the truth. And if you're listening to multiple radio stations around the world, you get a broader aspect of what's going on. And it is up to you to use what's between your ears to pick the information out that's probably the truth between all of the functions. So that's where I was going, Frank. It's an interesting what you say, Alan, and equally, when I've been abroad and I've said, I'm just now going to change frequencies, people look at you. I think the biggest problem possibly with a lot of shortwave radios today, because everybody's got internet and whatever, is people don't understand what propagation is, and they don't understand that different times of the day you're beaming to a country and then you change your frequency to somewhere else. And in fairness, why would you beam to a country in the middle of the night when nobody's going to be listening, or very few listening? So there's all these things that a lot of people don't fully get if they're not in a radio hobby or a radio person. So, Frank, sorry, I've been a bit long on that one.
Great point. And it segues into one of the things that Alan said. Alan, let me just ask you, We have so many futurists. My background, I'm a sociology professor and a statistician. So I come from thinking about these things. You remember Saturday Night Live, one of the little spoofs was public radio thinking deep thought. So I got paid to think deep thoughts for a number of years. Is radio dying?
No, it's metamorphosizing and changing. Radio will always be with us, even if it's more like a beloved medium. In other words, sometimes I use the analogy of antique cars. Are antique cars dying? No. The antique car hobby is more robust than ever. People are dragging out 57 Chevys everywhere, restoring them and driving them more and more and more. Is radio dying? It's changing. It's being added to the mix, different voices out there. We now have literally a cornucopia of choices. We can go digital, we can go analog. Those are the two kingdoms of audio that we can choose. And they both help each other. I mean, the digital world has enabled WBCQ to flourish because most of our programs provide programming to us through audio feeds, live feeds, audio downloads. When I'm sure both of you remember the days of cassette and reel-to-reel tape and records and everything else, which were great, but you needed a lot of resources and a lot of material to put through a broadcast day. Now everything can fit on a thumb drive. And those tools are incredible. Our analog transmitter is going to always be around. I believe shortwave will, mainly because it's an incredible platform. One transmitter can cover billions and billions of people, and very little infrastructure required in between the transmitter and a person's personal receiver. Listenership, I believe, will always maintain a good, robust fullness. In fact, it's interesting because as a broadcast station, we get a lot of the NAB and the Edison Institute and a lot of different surveys that come through, and they always put, even to this day, they always put radio listening as the number one audio source still in the United States of America. Now, does it dominate like it did in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s? No. But remember, we got a lot more people on the planet than we did in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s. So we have a lot more potential ears out. So the number of people that listen to radio is still incredibly high. And I know why, because there's just something about when you hear something on the radio, it's like reading a book. It gives it substance. It gives it something real. You know, it's not just this cyber thing on a screen somewhere or coming through your phone, which is a great resource, but it's still a phone. And a radio is still a radio with a tuning dial, and it brings in stations. And guess what? It's all free. That's right. It doesn't cost anything except the cost of the radio. And if you've got a solar-powered radio, it ain't even going to cost you the fee of batteries. So, yeah, it's going to be with us for a while. How much longer, I don't know. The feeling that we're getting here at WBCQ with our clients and our listeners is really a lot of people listen to us now because they feel we're real. They feel we're real people. And that's an issue now because with AI, what's real? What's going to be real? And you're a futurist, Frank. Think 5 years from now, is an AI bot going to be able to do a show like this and produce something exactly like what we're talking about? And how is a listener going to know that this is artificial intelligence or real? Now we know it's real, but I do the deep think. I think about that, and I'll tell you, as long as people can go out and inexpensively buy an AM, FM shortwave radio, I think they're going to continue to do it. They're going to continue to tune in, and they're going to continue to check out what's out there. And more, when they pick up an analog source like WBCQ and the many other shortwave stations that are on the air, they're going to hear it, and they're going to take it seriously as maybe the last truth they may ever hear, if the bots take over.
Alan, as you know, because you wrote a very nice a comment there, I recently published a paper in the Spectrum Monitor, and on the September 24th issue of Radio World, the broadcast magazine, there'll be an invited op-ed that I've written about it. My work as a college professor and sociologist and statistician is when I hear things like, oh, everyone's going left. No, everybody's going left. I see everybody going left. I start going, okay, well, let me count how many's going right. Let's sort of put some numbers there. And so I've heard, AM radio's dying. Car manufacturers don't want to put it in cars for various reasons. Tesla says it causes interference, then it doesn't cause interference depending on the committee they're talking to. And I go, wait a minute. If it's dying, then what would be the indicators that we can observe? Well, we would see licenses drop. We would see ad revenues as a predictor of that drop. We would see, because ad revenues dropped, it will have already dropped audience. So let's go look at what we publicly know. Now, the magic bullet is we don't know ad revenues in the AM sector separated from FM because they don't publish them separately. However, I tried to put that in perspective, and over the last 15, 20 years, it's dropping less than 1% a year. Okay, but Chicken Little, I hate to tell you, the sky ain't falling. Sure, it's cloudy. It's cloudier than it was, but the sky's not falling. And your point that I discovered, Alan, about trust is that radio has the highest reported trust level.
Yes.
For radio personality, as someone who is on the radio and has an identity rather than this amorphous voice, they will actually change stations if that personality moves. So this affinity, and it's fundamentally what you said, Alan, it's the trust that Larry Lujak, I don't care if Larry's name ain't Larry, but I know him as Larry Lujak on the Enormous 89, the Rock of Chicago, WLS. I trust that person. And so I think you have hit the so-called nail on the head with that, and it may fall tomorrow. However, my question has been, show me the data. In God we trust, others bring data. And yet, we don't have the data to say AM radio is dying. I quoted the New York Times in that study, the very famous, oh, hell is frozen over. Stephen King is selling his stations in Maine. That means the whole market is dying. And I think your kind letter indicated, well, we're in a tough market here in Maine. And in fact, it's one of the most difficult and challenging defined market areas, DMAs, that Nielsen tracks, along with a few others. So I try to bring data to myth. And that's the thing. It may die tomorrow, but it ain't dead today. It can still fog a mirror.
Well, we run an AM radio station up here. We have a 5 kilowatt non-directional on 780, which covers all over the place. And it's funny that you bring that up, because I had a friend of mine called me today and said that they were on Grand Manan Island, off the coast of Maine, and they ran into a person that listens to our AM, which is hundreds of miles away, every morning, because they're on Grand Manan in the middle of the ocean. It's an AM signal, and it comes in well. AM radio is going through change. Yes, it is. It's the oldest broadcast medium. It was, or still is, the foundation of the electronic internet that netted people together when it first kind of started broadcasting around 1920. So it's a 100-year-old medium. It's reliable. It's technologically easy to do. AM radios, you can make, well, as you know, you can make an AM radio out of a crystal diode and a coil and a capacitor and a good antenna. So it is a very accessible medium. Is it going to change? Yes. In fact, there are still, now think about this, there are still over 4,000 AM radio stations in North America, in this country. And many, some of them are struggling. A lot of them have FMs that the majority of people listen to in the market area, but the AM is still strong. It's going to change. In fact, I'm going to predict what I would love to see happen with the AM frequencies, because a lot of, we're losing probably 30, 40 AM stations a year for all kinds of reasons. The property like with Stephen King, the property becomes more valuable than the radio station. So, he had a beautiful, Blau Knox tower on a bunch of land that was transmitting 5 kilowatts on 620. I mean, that station you could hear all over the coast of Maine. Was built in 1937, and he dropped it down because the developer was going to come in and give him a whole bunch of money for the property, and that's happened to a lot of AM stations because AM radio takes a lot of real estate for the antenna and ground system. So we're going to lose stations, but I'll tell you.
But Allan, let me just interject. The same thing happens to Grandpa's farm when Walmart wants to build a supercenter. It's not unique. To radio.
It's not unique to radio, but it is happening to AM. But what I'd love to see in this country, you want to revitalize AM? As the stations keep going, the FCC, which probably won't want to bother with it because they're not good at doing stuff for the small individual. I would love to see the AM broadcast ban as it gets vacated by the broadcasters, turned over to the local community broadcasters, the amateur broadcast, to get on just like the old days, with 10 or 15 watts to cover their community with music and, social things and, cultural material and provide their area with that. I would love to see the ban eventually metamorphosize over to that. That would be a benefit in the public interest, allowing more people access to the airwaves, as my book, to get on the air. And I'm hoping that happens in the future, as a lot of stations probably will vacate. Some will remain, like we have AM 780 up here in Maine. We'll keep it going because we know there are people out in the middle of the woods that can't get any FM signals. But AM being a ground wave signal gets out. And that's an important resource. When you're in the middle of nowhere and you can't get internet and, there is no digit, and even the FM signals are absorbed by all the trees. Because I know I've been out in the middle of the Maine woods. You can't get nothing except the AM station. So it still has a niche. And again, it's still outrageously accessible. And it also, I was reading, the AM bill I just read today is going to be going to the floor of Congress, and I bet you they'll vote it in. AM in every car. I bet you they'll vote that in as a national resource, because I hate to say it, but in a national disaster, in a world disaster, what's the first thing everybody starts worrying about? Well, where's my AM radio? Where's my shortwave radio?
And it's part of the EAS. It's part of how we notify people. You've raised two good points, and let me amplify them. One problem in thinking about it, when people do futuring, sometimes they have financial interest. If I say Bitcoin's going to go great and I own some Bitcoin companies, hey, I'm self-serving, right? So you have some of that thinking. It's self-directed. Others want to make it binary. It's yes or no. It's left or right. It's dying or it's living. When we have a diversification or a diverse scenario, we don't think very clearly about it. And this is part of what you're talking about. There are some market areas, some DMAs that are dominated not by FM, but by AM. And why, goodness gracious, are they? It's the geography and topography. There used to be a show on called Justified about Kentucky, and a couple of Walton Goggins and a couple of other TV stars were on that. And the song came on and said, the sun rises about 10:30 and sets about 3:30. Well, how can that be? It's because of the mountains. And when you're in a mountain hollow, that's what day is if you find it by daylight. Same thing is in some mountain areas, FM doesn't get to the full market, AM does. So there's actually some DMAs dominated by AMs. The other thing, I finished a study for Radio Amateurs of Canada in a national survey of ham radio operators where they were members of RAC or not. And I found that shortwave listening was very significant. When I put the respondents on a map, guess where they were? They were in the equivalent of the Maine woods. That is, they were very isolated. They couldn't get TV signals. They couldn't get other stuff. but by George, they could get shortwave. And so the shortwave listening rates were very significant in Canada. My punchline is that diversity of the way things are inhibits us from talking about it because most thinkers want to make it binary. It's yes or no. So your comments are certainly well received. Let me just tell our listeners, we're talking with Allan Wiener up in Monticello, Maine, the owner of WBCQ Shortwave and some other commercial broadcasting stations about broadcasting today, here with Martin Butler M1MRB. Martin, you have worked for a company that works on transmitters. I know that one of Allan and his team's struggles are keeping those things hot. And I want to ask Allan, how much of your effort goes into just sheer day-to-day transmitter maintenance?
Oh, constantly. I mean, in fact, I've got to do some work on one of our transmitters this afternoon. Shortwave transmitters are big and powerful. We got about 5 of them here. Most of them are 50 kilowatt, with the exception of the Superstation, which is 500,000 watts. And they require a heck of a lot of maintenance. And we got to watch them. The older stuff is a lot easier to deal with than the newer stuff, because the newer stuff is partially computerized, which is basically a pain in the neck. But it's a constant process. The power levels involve, we've got power supplies that put out 14,000 volts at 60 amps. All this, stuff is, you can't make a mistake with it. There's no forgiveness. It's big stuff, big tubes, big coils, ginormous transformers, big power control circuitry, and safety is number one. That's as engineers, because I'm an old radio engineer. And, safety is number one whenever we deal with this stuff. But it's a constant process. And sadly, there are fewer and fewer people in the high-powered transmitter arts. We have a hard time getting anyone to come up here and do engineering for us that can deal with this kind of stuff, which is big and powerful. And it's a problem. I'm way past retirement age. Tim Smith, one of our master engineers, he's semi-retired. We've got a good crew. We got a good staff. But it's getting hard to find people that can deal with this, very, very high-powered, a bit esoteric equipment, because it is high frequency, and it is RF. It's a little bit of black magic. It's not just 5 volts and digital logic circuits. It's it's a lot of big stuff, and getting people that can deal. Like, I come up here I spend most of my time in Florida. I come up here on maintenance jaunts. And I just jump from transmitter to transmitter to transmitter, keeping them going. And that's what we've been doing here at WBCQ. And it's a lot of fun. I love the work. And I love working on high-powered equipment. It's exciting. It's exciting hitting the plate on and seeing all them amperes and all them volts hitting the PA tubes and and knowing, one thing I've learned, guys, is every time we hit the plate switch and turn on a shortwave transmitter, we know there are listeners on the other end tuning in. It always happens, and it's been going on since I've been in the shortwave business. And it's very satisfying, and it's very exciting. We get QSL reports, both written and email from all over the world. And it's very heartening to get an email from a listener saying, thank you for what you're broadcasting. I don't necessarily agree at all times with everything that you transmit, but thank God you're there broadcasting it and maintaining free speech throughout the world. It's very, very satisfying work. It really is.
Martin, you worked for a transmitter manufacturer from, may not have been shortwave. I think you said it was FM. But from the manufacturer's side of things, what was your experience in once you got something out in the field on the maintenance end?
Well, I think the biggest problem from an FM type system, which is slightly different to what Alan's talking about, is they put the transmitter in the most hostile environment they can find. They're obvious. Now you laugh, Alan, but you find that the
I don't laugh, because I've installed and serviced a lot of FM transmitters and on top of mountains on horrible roads in the middle of winter when you practically do life and limb to get there. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, there's that side, and then if they're in a town or a city, they put them in lift motor rooms. Above the lift shaft, there's the motor room where all the gears and everything go up and down. They're often in there. Quite often the doors are hanging off, so they're damp environments. They rust. The other thing is lightning strikes. You haven't mentioned that, but you have a lightning strike, your PA's gone straight away. It's a return to base usually. It's not something that your local engineer is going to do. Power supplies die purely because of damp and dirt and muck and all those sort of things. So in fairness, there was always a lot of maintenance to go on. Often we would get them back at the manufacturer, and sometimes you'd literally got to rebuild the thing if it's had a lightning strike to get it back on the air. Power supplies dying all the time. It's a horrible environment that some of these things have to run in. And you say, some I know were on mountain tops in like these little plastic shed things on a mountain top, and others are in lift motor rooms and things like that, which is equally not very good. So that's where I'm coming from, I think.
No, been there, done that. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah. Lightning has blasted a lot of things with us.
Yeah.
Alan, I will tell you, your comment about hitting the button. As a 20-year-old, I led the development of two stations, a college FM station. It's now nearing 50 years of age, and it's going to celebrate the 50-year hitting the switch. Big, powerful 10 watts at the time. They've moved up to about 3,000 in power and moved up the dial. But the second one was a commercial AM station that three guys that got tired of paying what they thought were exorbitant ad rates to the one station in town. And New Year's, as they threw their martini glasses into the fireplace, like the movies, they said, we'll plant a turnip patch or we'll build a radio station. So it turned out all three of them said they wanted to build a radio station after they did that. Let's hire that boy over to the college to build it for us. Well, I was the boy over to the college getting the college FM station. First thing I told him is, you hire somebody from the University of Georgia with a degree in broadcasting, because I can help you do the license. I can help you pick people. I can help you do that. But I really kind of want to be news director. So that was my route. But my punchline is this: with that mighty third class FCC license, when I got to turn it on and light the plate in the morning, it's a thrill I've never forgotten.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah,
and you know that. And back as a boy with some equipment, maybe not, I've got the advantage of seeing video in some of your really cool Collins and Hallicrafters, perhaps looking gear there. I used to think the little blue lights in the tubes to go with the red lights were really cool till I realized the tube was beginning to fail and get gassy. Learned that. Let me kind of wind up a couple of things here. You broadcast what people pay for, as any business probably would. One of the things I've always been puzzled about is the mainline church organizations often put megabucks into missionary work, where they fund people to go overseas to preach their version of the gospel or their religious beliefs. And yet, when you begin to talk to them about, yes, continue to do that, but you know how you can leverage that? You can leverage your message through shortwave radio. And part of what those missionaries do is get shortwave receivers for those people there. And I have a hard time getting them convinced that that's a viable option. And yet, to me, it seems so logical.
It is. It is. And we have had many religious broadcasters on the air that have done missionary work, via WBCQ for that very reason. However, we've been in contact with a lot of the major religious organizations. I'll give an example, like Moody Bible Institute. Moody
very well known, venerable.
Very, very good people. And, they're on AM, FM television, etc. And we've been approaching them for the last couple of months, trying, question, why aren't you on shortwave? I mean, your statements, your missionary work, your broadcast outreach. I mean, shortwave is a perfect venue for you. And we have several transmitters available for 24-hour use. And of course, WBCQ, our rates are the lowest, period, in the industry, have been since we went on the air in 1998. And it's interesting, the people that program at Moody think it's a great idea, fantastic, and they would do it tomorrow. But they take it to the board, and they take it to the people that control the money and have no concept of, they don't even know what shortwave is. And they go, oh, we don't need this. We have the internet. And, what do you do? I mean, and, we have people that broker our station, and they're trying to educate them and say, you're leaving out an entire worldwide media situation of people that long for this and search the radio bands every day for this kind of information. You can get on these stations very inexpensively, especially compared to all the satellite fees and the television and the network fees you're paying now. This is nickel and dime stuff, but it really is an education. And, it always has been. A lot of people have heard of shortwave. They'll go, oh, shortwave radio, that's what the hams use, or that's what the military uses to communicate throughout the world. So, so, when you educate them a little bit and go, no, it's a way for people to connect worldwide using inexpensive shortwave radios. Oh, yeah, well, I've heard of that. My uncle was a ham or a shortwave listener and used to listen to Radio Moscow and all those other stations, back in the 60s and 70s. So it's a bit of an educational process, especially as younger people get into, heads of organizations. And
Well,
but
Allan,
that's what we're up against.
One of the key threats, to complement what you're saying, one of the key threats in some countries, China's a perfect example. Missionaries go in and they try to get a version of the Bible, depending upon, the particular denomination, and they try to get them to believers there or people that they are soliciting. And the problem there is that they have to hide the Bible. And if it's found, they could be killed. I mean, in some countries, it's that much. However, what astounds me is the covert nature of a receiver, covert in the sense you don't know what people have been listening to, and how well that would work in actually protecting the people that they're proselytizing. Anyways, just some thoughts there. I want to shift to this. You've touched on a couple of things. Our listeners look at the Spectrum Monitor. Ken Reitz has got a coterie of different writers who are experts on different things you can hear on the radio. Some of it is stations like WBCQ and what are they broadcasting and where are they located and where can you hear them. Some others are weird sounds on the radio. What is that? Others are listen to the government like Chris Parrott. He's absolutely an expert. Oh, what are these people reading numbers in Spanish? What is all that all about? So many things out on the shortwave bands that if you can't find anything on Netflix that interests you, gee whiz, there's a whole world out there on something called radio. And so the Spectrum Monitor is certainly one outlet that still covers treading on Bob Grove work with monitoring times. And so they still do a great job in covering what's available on shortwave. Martin and I, Allan, have pioneered something we call SMART, Saturday morning amateur radio time at libraries. Get smart at the library. Martin has done that in South London for one semester. I'm beginning to kick it off here in central Mississippi. I live in a suburb of the capital of Jackson, and the Madison County Library System. We'll kick that off in January. And one of the things, you touched on this, the first one's going to be how to listen to the world for free on the internet using the web SDRs to try to introduce them into what you can hear. And you can bet your bottom dollar WBCQ will be one of the stations that I will exhibit there, and I'll find whichever transmitter is heard by whichever radio is close by, and will certainly share that with them. There's just such an excitement, particularly for young people, if they see something that's different than their parents are listening to.
Yeah, I'll give you that one.
Yeah, it's exciting. Radio is exciting, and it's fun, and it's cheap, and it's easy, and it's easy to connect. I mean, I have a radio in my bed. I tune it in every night just to get AM radio DX, which sometimes puts me to sleep.
We must be cousins, Allan. I still have my earpods since I was 8 years old. I've listened to the earpods, and as a ham, I can usually tell the impact of a solar storm.
Yeah, me too.
Or the next day, because if I can hear WLS, if I can hear WHAS, if I can, and I go around the big numbers out there on the clear channels, and I've done it long enough where I can tell. And to this day, one of the most exciting pieces of DX I've ever heard was as a small boy in middle Georgia, where I grew up, on a cold winter's night with one of those old Philco table radios, and I had built a wire-wound spider loop out of the International Radio Club of America mimeographed newsletter. And I heard the new Atlanta Hawks move to Atlanta from St. Louis, play the Lakers, and I listened to it from a station in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And in my mind, the Hawks won, and I don't care what the score is. In my mind, they won the game. So those were exciting days. Allan, any final comments you might make to our listeners? You yourself don't hold a ham license. Clearly, you listen to amateur radio as well as a whole host of other things. I think you've had at least one ham, maybe into RJ Reed Jiram, or I think I remember maybe buying some time on your station. I may have.
We've had, Tim Tron, who's one of our master engineers. I mean, he's been a ham ever since Walk. We've had a lot of amateur radio people work at the station. Radio's where it's at. WBCQ.com is our website. We sell airtime to anyone. You can broadcast and say anything you want to a worldwide listening audience. Radio is not dead. It's changing, just like everything else on
Thank you.
Earth. It is changing and metamorphosizing, and everything has to change, ladies and gentlemen, because without change, you get stagnation. And I think the AM band will reinvent itself and serve the public. I think shortwave, like antique cars, is here to stay forever. FM radio is very effective, thanks to Edwin Armstrong. It's a wonderful invention that still worldwide has a wonderful analog footprint throughout the world. The digital world is complementary. It's all about communications. And it's all about people getting together and communicating with each other, because here at WBCQ, what we believe is if you're communicating with each other, talking with each other, interacting, knowing each other worldwide, you're less prone to fight and argue and battle, because the secret to peace is knowing each other as God's children throughout the world. And that's what radio does. It has been bringing people together for over 100 years. The first social media was electronic social media was AM radio. And by the way, shortwave, it's just fancy AM. That's all. Shortwave.
Allan, there's a social science behind what you just said. And the first step toward reducing conflict is to recognize the other person as a person and to communicate. And that begins to create a social bond. One of the things that...
We're all riders on this bus, ladies and gentlemen.
And you can help put gas in the bus with WBCQ. They have a GoFundMe on their webpage, and they're always in the need of some of those expensive iMac tubes and other bits and pieces and things. And so there is a GoFundMe on their webpage. And so if your heart desires to help, then that's one place to go. Allan, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy maintenance schedule and from your time, as you call it, in the land of flaw.
The land of flaw. Well, Martin, nice meeting you. And Frank, a pleasure talking with you. And let me just close with this. No matter what, there's more radio to come.
Yeah, Allan, I appreciate what you've told me. I have an open mind. I've listened, and I'm going to process it, obviously, offline when we've finished. But you make a lot of sense. So thank you very much. I enjoyed speaking with you. I'll pass back to Frank.
Blessings to all, and all be well.
Thank you, Allan.
Right,
bye-bye.
Take care. Yeah, bye.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our features episode. Something a little bit different for you, and certainly Allan there is certainly someone very clever, and so he might have interested some thoughts or some ideas from there. So hope you really did enjoy that interview with Allan. Now, we were at UK Hamfest a few weeks ago, and also have done Frederikshavn this year, and at both those events, not only do we get you interviews for the ICQ podcast show, but we also do video content as well for those shows. So if you're not a member of the newsletter and haven't heard about these videos yet, do check them out on YouTube. You can find the ICQ podcast page there, and as I say, there'll be those list of videos there. Let's say they take a little bit of time to put together, but we're fairly quick in getting them out and done. And as I say, you can check out those videos from there. And not only that, but you can also check out sometimes some other people that go to these events to do videos, because our lovely orange t-shirts get picked up regularly, don't they, Dad?
They certainly do, Colin. And in fairness, TX Factor, I'll give them a buzz. We like the guys from TX Factor. They always talk to us when we're at rallies as well. We get on well with them. But they caught me acting a fool, and they left it in. So we were walking towards them. I didn't realise they were filming, and I gave them a bit of a giggle. So shows we all have fun together, Colin, I think.
Yeah, true. Now we got some feedback on some of those videos. So we start off with Jose Neves on YouTube, and it's in relation to our update video with Yesu, where we were talking about the FTX 101, and he says, thanks for the video. Yes, the Atos 120A works very well with this radio. So that's a good bit of feedback there from, someone that's seen that video there on YouTube.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I was quite pleased that the ATAS 120 does work very well. It's just something that at the time when I was talking to Carl, it just suddenly came into my mind. It would be useful if it did, and it does. So there you go, guys. The ATAS 120 has been around at least 20 years, but it's one of those products that still carries on working.
Yep, now next piece of feedback is in relation to SDR Play, and Dino Papas, who is a long-time supporter of the show and friend of the show, says he recently got a new NRSP ST unit, and it runs really well on his Mac Silicon computer. So thanks for letting us know, Dino. As someone that's currently playing around with Mac at the moment, really great to hear you're having great success there with that SDR Play unit. And as I say, SDR is always very popular stand at a lot of these ham events and the work they're doing.
Certainly are, Colin. And I spent a fair bit of time with Andy on a couple of occasions up at the National Ham Fest. Andy's always great to talk to, but I'm also conscious that I don't want to monopolise him and take him away from talking to other amateurs who may very well be customers. But I think a lot of things is that the SDR Play units are particularly becoming almost the industry standard that you measure everything else against. So, great work Andy's doing on the new software, by the way.
Yeah, this next bit here, I think it came from a gentleman called Pete Watts. I'll be honest, I didn't quite get time to look up the call sign, but the call sign is Golf 0 Foxtrot Quebec Bravo. And it's in relation to the Kanga products interview we did. Now, Kanga, as we mentioned in the interview, have been resurrected. And he says, I looked at the stand at Newark and I've looked at the instruction sheet since. I must say I'm very impressed with the level of detail. has commented in the video, lovely to see a long-standing name preserved, and I'll be looking for a project kit to build over the winter. So, I mean, that's a great bit of news there for the gentleman that, as I say, has revived Kanga products, that customers are still interested in the quality of the products and what they're doing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I did pick up, I'll say, is that the quality of the kits. I mean, sometimes you build a kit and there's no case or box to put it in, and you put it in and it looks pretty much real rubbish. I mean, there's something sitting in front of Colin at the moment, an ATU that I ruined the front panel on, and it'll never look any good. Whereas the Kanga products, the guy has got proper cases for the kits. So if you're going to spend time building something, you might as well put it in a proper case and use it. So, and the documentation, as you say, Colin, very, very good. I've looked at a couple. Don't be surprised if I get a couple of Kanga kits in the near future.
There you go. Well, you know, it's October. Start building your Christmas list. That's all I'm going to say. So Santa might be good to you this year if you've been good and haven't drunk too much coffee. There you go. Okay, last one here. And as I say, we do pick up feedback from some of the older episodes as well. We're going back here to episode 448, and the episode was Did You Know Q&A, and Sandip EI7 India Juliet Bravo thanks us for the feature, and he didn't know that certain resistors could introduce inductance. God, that was a tongue twister for this time of day, I tell you. But yeah, so as I say, Sandit really appreciate that piece of advice there.
Yeah, there's lots of little bits and pieces that we come across and we try and pass on to everybody. It's something that we don't go away and think, oh, we know better than anybody else. If I find out something, I like to share it. And yeah, carbon composite resistors are the best type to use around RF circuits, because anything that's got a spiral cut into it potentially could act as an inductor. Obviously wire wound resistors do, but there you go. So just keep an eye on it, that's all.
There you go. So we appreciate all the feedback, guys. You can send it to us wherever we can potentially see it. So there's a contact us section on the ICQ podcast webpage. There's also areas you can pop it in on each episode. YouTube, we keep an eye on Twitter, Facebook, etc., guys. So wherever we could potentially pick up your feedback, we'd be great to hear about it. Right, well, we'd like to obviously thank our monthly subscription donors who send us their very kind support and see the value in what we do and keeping the show advert free. If you found, say, some benefit in today's show, please do consider visiting ICQPodcast.com/donate, where to say the donations you send keep us advert free, keep us doing what we do, and helps us keep developing your show as well. So please do consider, say, that link and showing the value you received. Obviously, we'd like to thank Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa for their very kind time donation, and also their views in the News Roundtable. Many thanks for taking part there. Right, well, as I say, that rounds up episode 467 of your ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. God, I need to struggle to get those out of my teeth when you get stuck there. I think our last thing to do is say, we did mention it a little while ago then in the roundup here. If you're not a member of the newsletter, please go to the website and sign up to the newsletter and make sure you get the latest amateur radio news between shows delivered to you, and obviously knowledge when we're doing special stuff like videos, etc. Make sure you get on that subscription list. It's free. We won't sell you details, and as I say, you'll get access to more information, between shows. So please do consider that. Right, well, I'm going to bid you guys 73s, and as I'm actually in London finishing off this show on a mad sort of flying trip into London, I think I'm going to be the one that goes downstairs and rummage in your cupboards and make sure you've been buying good stuff for Mrs. B during the week, and make sure she gets a treat.
She certainly has got a treat in the cupboard, Colin. So yeah, we'll go and have a cup or two, Mrs. B, in a minute, and set the world to rights. And yeah, it's been fun. So as I say, we'll do it again soon. 73, guys.
Yeah, 73. Bye bye.